Captain Alara Finch stood at the command console of Astra Prime, her eyes scanning the holomap of the asteroid field surrounding the remote station. For weeks, her team had been picking up strange readings from deep space, signals that couldn't be fully decrypted. But today, something changed. A message came through, unencrypted. The Varnok, a mysterious alien species that had been at odds with humanity for decades, were interested in the station, specifically something hidden deep in its vaults. Ilara turned to her crew, her expression grim. The Varnok know we're here. They're coming. Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Novan Gray, approached her. What do they want? We haven't engaged them in this sector for months. Ilara tapped the console, bringing up a file that had been transmitted earlier. The words Project Genesis flashed across the screen, along with a genetic code sequence. She glanced at Nolan before speaking. It's not what we have. It's who we are. The door to the command center slid open, and Dr. Lex Renfield entered, his eyes wide with urgency. Captain, I've cracked the code from the Varnok transmission. They're after the formula. Nolan raised an eyebrow. What formula? Lex stepped forward, a handheld device in his hand, projecting a hologram of human DNA. This station was tasked with decoding ancient genetic data found in the oldest human remains ever discovered. What we found was extraordinary. Humans have a dormant sequence in their DNA that, when activated, could unlock unprecedented physical and cognitive abilities. It's essentially a Supersoldier Formula, one that's been hiding in our genes all along. Ilara crossed her arms. So, the Varnok want this to weaponize it. Can we destroy the data? Lex shook his head. It's already in our DNA. If they capture even one of us, they can extract it. A heavy silence fell over the room. The stakes were clear. If the Varnok got their hands on this formula, humanity would be at their mercy. Just then, a warning klaxon blared throughout the station. Ilara's fingers flew over the controls. We've got incoming. Varnok ships are moving into attack formation. Her heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. Get everyone to battle stations. We can't let them take this formula, no matter what. As the crew scrambled to prepare, Ilara's thoughts turned to the impossible task ahead. The Varnok were coming, and there was no way off this rock. They'd have to fight, and win, against an enemy they barely understood. In the lower levels of Astra Prime, the tension was palpable. Engineers rushed to reinforce the station's defenses, and soldiers armed themselves for the inevitable breach. Ilara moved through the narrow corridors, issuing orders to her team. At her side was Dr. Lex Renfield, who was visibly uneasy. You've been quiet, Ilara said, glancing at him. I've been thinking, Lex replied. If the Varnok get their hands on this formula, they could use it to create an army of super soldiers, and not just from humans, they could adapt it to their own biology. Ilara frowned. Is there a way to stop them from doing that? Lex hesitated. Maybe, but it would mean using the formula ourselves. Ilara stopped in her tracks. You're suggesting we experiment with this, on us? Lex nodded slowly. It could give us the edge we need. The Varnok have superior technology, but if we use the formula, we might stand a chance. Ilara didn't respond immediately. She understood the gravity of what Lex was proposing. It was one thing to fight with weapons, but to alter their very nature. The consequences could be catastrophic. Before she could decide, the station shook violently as the first wave of Varnok ships arrived. Ilara steadied herself against the wall. We'll have to worry about that later, she said. Right now, we need to survive. The fight was coming, and whether they liked it or not, the fate of humanity was tied to the hidden potential inside them all. Ilara and her team assembled in the station's command center, preparing for the imminent assault. As the Varnok ships began their approach, the tension in the room thickened. Everyone knew what was at stake, but no one could predict how this battle would unfold. Ilara, Lex said softly, standing beside her. Whatever happens, we can't let them take us. If they do, it's over. Ilara nodded, her jaw set. They won't. As the Varnock closed in, Captain Ilara Finch steeled herself for the fight of her life. This wouldn't just be a battle for survival, it would be a battle for the future of humanity. And the only thing standing between the Varnock and the Supersoldier Formula was the courage and resilience of her team. The war was about to begin. The alarms blared as Varnock ships breached Astra Prime's perimeter. In the command center, Ilara watched the screens displaying the enemy forces closing in on the station. Their sleek obsidian-black ships spliced through space like predators hunting their prey. "Captain," Lieutenant Nolan Gray said, pulling up the station's defense systems. "We have only 2 automated turrets left. The Varnock will be in range in minutes." Ilara's heart pounded in her chest. She looked at Nolan, then at the crew gathered around them. Their faces were tight with fear, but beneath that she saw resolve. These were her people, humans who had faced impossible odds before. They would do it again. "Power up the turrets," Ilara ordered, "and prepare the defense teams at the airlocks. We can't let them get inside." Nolan nodded, and the crew rushed into action. Dr. Lex Renfield, standing nearby, checked his handheld device again, reanalyzing the genetic data. His eyes flicked toward Ilara, worry evident on his face. "Captain, this formula could be our only shot," Lex said quietly, stepping closer to her. "We're outnumbered, outgunned. If we don't enhance our soldiers, we're done for." Ilara clenched her jaw. She knew Lex was right. The Varnock weren't just coming to fight. They were coming to take the formula, to twist it into something that could end humanity's reign among the stars. But was it worth the risk to alter themselves? Was tampering with the human genome any better than letting the Varnock have it? Before Ilara could respond, a blast rocked the station. The lights flickered, and a metallic groan echoed through the structure. They were here. "Captain," Nolan called, his voice tense. "They've breached the outer defenses. We've got Varnock commandos on the lower decks." Ilara grabbed her helmet and locked it into place. "Get the defense teams moving. We'll meet them head-on. Lex, you're coming with me." Lex hesitated, holding his device tightly, but nodded. "I'll do what I can." The corridors of Astra Prime were narrow and winding, perfect for defense but claustrophobic in the heat of battle. Ilara led her team to the lower levels where the Varnock had landed. The sound of distant gunfire echoed through the metallic halls, mixed with the screams of soldiers caught in the initial wave. Ilara turned to her squad, the rough faces of her troopers staring back at her. There was Nolan, a steady presence at her side, always ready for the fight. There was Sergeant Alina Graves, a grizzled engineer who had seen more combat than most. Her mechanical arm clicked softly as she prepped her rifle. "We hold the line," Ilara said, her voice firm. "The Varnock think they can take this station. They're wrong. We are humanity's last defense, and we will not break." A chorus of affirmations followed, but their moment of resolve was shattered by an explosion down the hall. The Varnock were close. Ilara pressed herself against the wall, peering around the corner. She caught sight of them, tall, armored figures with smooth, featureless faces, their dark armor glinting with an unnatural sheen. They moved with unnerving precision, their energy weapons glowing a sickly green as they advanced. "Get ready," Ilara called. The hallway erupted into chaos. Energy bolts flew past them, striking the walls with sizzling bursts of heat. Ilara and her team returned fire, their rifles lighting up the narrow corridor. The Varnock were fast, but the humans fought with a tenacity born from desperation. Nolan took a position beside Ilara, his rifle cracking off shots that sent sparks flying from the Varnock armor. "There's too many of them." Ilara gritted her teeth, firing round after round, but the Varnock kept advancing. "Fall back. We'll regroup at the engineering bay." The squad moved quickly, retreating through the winding halls as they laid down suppressing fire. The Varnock, relentless as ever, continued their pursuit. As they reached the engineering bay, Sergeant Alina Graves slammed the doors shut and activated the barricades. "That'll hold them off for a bit, but we can't keep this up forever." Ilara leaned against the wall, catching her breath. Lex was already at the terminal, scanning the genetic data again. "Captain, this is it," he said, urgency in his voice. "If we don't use the formula, we're finished. We can't hold them off much longer." Ilara felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She glanced at her team, exhausted, wounded, but still fighting. Lex's words echoed in her mind. If they used the formula, they could have a chance to turn the tide. But if it went wrong, they could become something worse than the Varnok. Before she could respond, the door shook violently. The Varnok were trying to breach the barricade. "We don't have time for this," Nolan shouted. "What are we doing, Captain?" Ilara made her decision. She turned to Lex. "How fast can we administer the formula?" Lex looked at her, his eyes wide. "I can have it ready in minutes, but it hasn't been tested." "We don't have the luxury of testing," Ilara interrupted. "Do it. Prepare the formula. We're out of options." Lex nodded, moving quickly to a medical console and pulling up the formula sequence. As he worked, Ilara turned to her squad. "This is it. We're going to become something more, something that can beat the Varnok. But once we take this step, there's no going back. You with me?" There was a moment of silence, then Alina stepped forward, her mechanical arm whirring softly. "I've come this far. Might as well see it through." Nolan nodded, gripping his rifle. "Let's do it." One by one, the team gathered around Lex as he prepared the syringes filled with the Supersoldier Formula. Ilara took the first one, the cool metal of the syringe pressing against her skin. The door shook again, harder this time. The Varnok were almost through. "On my mark," Ilara said, her voice steady. "We take the formula, we fight, and we win." The squad nodded in unison. "Ilara," Lex said softly, handing her the syringe. "Good luck." Ilara looked at her team one last time. "We make our stand here. For humanity." And with that, she injected the formula. Ilara felt the formula surge through her veins like fire. Her pulse quickened, muscles tensed, and her senses sharpened almost instantly. The pain was intense, but it was quickly replaced by a flood of raw energy. She gasped as the room came into crystal-clear focus, the soft whirring of the barricades, the tense breathing of her squad, even the subtle hum of the station's systems. It was as if she had been reborn. "Everyone, report," Ilara barked, her voice now steady and stronger than before. Nolan was the first to respond, flexing his fingers. "I feel stronger, faster." Sergeant Alina Graves rotated her mechanical arm with a sharp click, eyes wide in amazement. "I've never felt anything like this. My arm's running smoother than it ever has, and my whole body feels supercharged." Lex stood at the back, observing the team with apprehension. "The formula is working, but the long-term effects are still unknown. We need to be cautious." Ilara nodded, but the sound of pounding at the barricade reminded her that caution was a luxury they couldn't afford. The Varnok were almost through, and the real test was about to begin. She glanced at the barricade. "Get ready, we make our stand here." As the doors buckled under the relentless assault, the room filled with tension. Every heartbeat was a countdown. Ilara could hear her squad breathing, and something else, the low, steady thrum of power in their bodies, as if the formula had tapped into something primal. Then the doors exploded inward with a deafening crash. The Varnok commandos poured through, their weapons glowing with lethal green energy. But this time, Ilara and her squad weren't the same as before. They moved faster, reacted quicker, and fought with newfound ferocity. Ilara was the first to charge, her enhanced muscles propelling her forward like a bullet. She slammed into the nearest Varnok with a force that sent it flying backward, its armor crumpling under the impact. In one fluid motion, she pulled her rifle and fired a clean shot at another, the round piercing its armor with ease. The rest of the squad followed suit, their movements synchronized and precise. Nolan and Alina were unstoppable, cutting down Varnock commandos with brutal efficiency. It was as if they could anticipate the enemy's moves, reacting faster than the Varnock could adjust. For the first time, Ilara saw fear in the Varnock's eyes. But as the battle raged on, something gnawed at the back of her mind. They had won this skirmish, but the Varnock were relentless. They wouldn't stop coming. And there was another problem. The formula was untested. They didn't know how long this newfound power would last or what the side effects could be. As the last of the Varnock fell, Ilara stood in the silence that followed. Her breath came in short, controlled bursts. The squad had taken out every commando with minimal effort, but they all knew this was only the beginning. Nolan approached her, wiping the blood from his brow. "We held them off, but they'll be back, and next time they'll come in greater numbers." Ilara nodded. "We'll need to plan our next move. We can't stay here." Just as she was about to issue new orders, an alert flashed on her wrist communicator. It was a transmission from the station's security systems. There had been a breach in the upper levels. "More Varnock?" Alina asked, checking her rifle. "No," Ilara said, narrowing her eyes as she read the report. "It's not the Varnock. It's internal." The words sent a chill through the room. Ilara brought up the station's surveillance feed on a nearby console. The footage showed a figure moving through the upper decks, bypassing security and heading straight for the research labs. Ilara zoomed in on the figure and her blood ran cold. It was Lieutenant Soren Carvos, one of their own. "What the hell is he doing?" Nolan muttered. Ilara's jaw clenched. "He's going for the formula." Lex stepped forward, his face pale. If Soren takes the formula data, he could sell it to the highest bidder, or worse, hand it directly to the Varnock. He's betraying us. "We need to stop him," Alina said, already moving toward the exit. Ilara held up her hand. "Wait, we need to think this through. Soren is highly trained, and he knows this station better than any of us. If we go after him recklessly, we could end up walking into a trap." Nolan shook his head. "What's there to think about? He's betraying humanity. We can't let him escape with that data." Ilara's mind raced. Soren had always been quiet, a reliable soldier but never one to draw attention to himself. Now it made sense. He had been playing the long game, waiting for the right moment to strike. But why? "There's more to this," Ilara said, pacing the room. "Soren could have defected to the Varnock a long time ago if he wanted to. Why now? Why take the formula data when the station is under attack?" Lex, still analyzing the situation, spoke up. "Maybe he's not working for the Varnock. Maybe he's trying to destroy the data to keep it out of everyone's hands." Alina scoffed. "That's a dangerous assumption." Ilara agreed, but they didn't have time to debate. "We need to move. Whether he's trying to steal the data or destroy it, we can't let him make that call." With that, Ilara led her team toward the research labs. They moved through the dimly lit corridors, their enhanced senses on high alert. The formula coursed through their bodies, giving them the strength and speed they needed to catch up with Soren. As they approached the lab's entrance, Ilara signaled for her team to stop. She peeked around the corner, spotting Soren inside the lab, furiously typing at a terminal. "We go in hard and fast," Ilara whispered. "No second chances." The squad nodded, weapons ready. On Ilara's mark, they burst into the lab. Soren spun around, his eyes wide with shock. For a split second, Ilara saw something in his expression, regret. "Stop," Soren shouted, holding up his hands. "You don't understand." Ilara raised her weapon, her voice cold. "I understand perfectly. You're a traitor." Before she could pull the trigger, Soren took a step back and pointed to the terminal. "You don't know what this formula will do. It's not just a weapon, it's a curse. If the Varnock get their hands on it, they won't need an army. They'll turn us into them." Ilara hesitated, her finger hovering over the trigger. "What do you mean?" Soren's voice was desperate. "The formula, It doesn't just enhance us, it changes us. I've seen the reports. It's why I've been working with the Varnok to stop this. The room fell silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Elara's heart pounded in her chest. Was he telling the truth, or was this just another lie? She had to decide, trust Soren or stop him, no matter the cost. Elara's heart raced as Soren's words hung in the air, each syllable a heavy weight that threatened to throw everything into chaos. Could he be telling the truth? Could the formula, this last hope of survival, actually be a curse? You expect us to believe that? Alina's voice was cold, her rifle trained on Soren. Her mechanical arm hummed with barely restrained tension. Soren didn't flinch. His eyes locked onto Elara's, pleading, "Look at the data. It's all there. The formula doesn't just enhance humans. It alters us at the genetic level in ways we don't fully understand. I've seen it happen in early tests. The Varnok used captured humans to experiment. It worked, but those soldiers didn't stay human for long." Elara narrowed her eyes. Then why are the Varnok after it? Why would they want something that could destroy them? Soren's jaw clenched. Because they want to control it. They believe they can adapt it to their own biology, use it to evolve themselves, while turning us into their slaves, or worse. Elara's mind raced as she processed his words. The thought of losing their humanity was terrifying, but could they really trust a man who had been working with the enemy? Yet, something in his eyes made her pause. This wasn't the face of someone drunk on power. This was someone desperate, someone who had seen the horrors that might lie ahead. Nolan's voice cut through the tension. "Captain, we don't have time for this. The Varnok will be back any moment, and we can't risk him getting away with that data." Elara turned to Lex, who was standing by the terminal, his fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. "Lex, can you verify what he's saying?" Lex's brow furrowed in concentration as he pulled up the files Soren had been accessing. His eyes widened as lines of code and test results flashed on the screen. There's something here. Soren's not lying. The formula alters human DNA in ways we didn't anticipate. It could push us past the point of no return." Alina lowered her weapon slightly, her face tight with anger. "So, what? We just give up. We let the Varnok win." "No," Elara said, her voice firm. "But we have to be smart about this." She turned to Soren. "If what you're saying is true, why didn't you come to us sooner? Why the secrecy? Why the betrayal?" Soren's face hardened. "You wouldn't have listened. High Command is desperate, and desperation makes people blind. They would have used the formula without considering the cost. I thought I could stop it by working from the shadows, but the Varnok found out about the formula before I could destroy it." Elara's eyes flicked to the terminal, then back to Soren. There was no time to deliberate further. The station shook violently as another wave of explosions rattled the walls. The Varnok were coming, and they wouldn't stop until they had the formula. "We have to make a decision," Nolan said, stepping forward. "Do we destroy the formula, or do we use it to fight them off?" Elara felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her like a crushing force. If they destroyed the formula, they might lose their only chance to defeat the Varnok. But if they used it, they could be dooming humanity to a fate worse than death. "We destroy it," Elara finally said, her voice resolute. "We can't risk losing our humanity." Lex hesitated but nodded, pulling up the protocol to wipe the data. "It'll take a few minutes to purge everything. We have to hold them off until it's done." Alina grimaced, her mechanical arm flexing. "Then we'd better get ready." Suddenly, the station's lights flickered, and the heavy thud of metal echoed down the corridor. The Varnok were here, and they were breaching the outer walls. Elara grabbed her rifle and motioned to her squad. "We hold them off here. Lex, stay behind and finish the purge. Soren, you're with us." Soren hesitated, glancing at the terminal. "I'll stay here and help. I know the systems better than anyone." Elara stared at him for a moment, then nodded. "Don't make me regret this." As Lex and Soren worked to erase the formula from existence, Ilara, Nolan, and Alina moved into position, blocking the narrow entrance to the lab. The distant sound of boots and metal echoed through the halls, growing louder with each passing second. The Varnok were coming in force, and they had no intention of leaving survivors. The first wave hit hard. Varnok soldiers, sleek and deadly, charged down the corridor with blinding speed. Their energy weapons glowed green, lighting up the darkness as they fired with lethal precision. Ilara dove for cover behind a console, returning fire in quick, controlled bursts. Her enhanced reflexes made her faster than she had ever been, but the Varnok were relentless. Nolan and Alina fought beside her, their movements sharp and precise. Alina's mechanical arm tore through a Varnok soldier with brutal efficiency, while Nolan's rifle spat fire, taking down enemies one by one. Despite the overwhelming odds, they held their ground, refusing to let the Varnok get past them. But the enemy kept coming. "They're too many," Nolan shouted over the noise of battle. "We can't hold them off much longer." Ilara knew he was right. They were being overwhelmed. For every Varnok they took down, 2 more seemed to take its place. She glanced back at Lex and Soren, who were frantically working at the terminal. "Hurry up," Ilara yelled. "We're almost there," Lex called back, his fingers flying over the keyboard. But just as the words left his mouth, the terminal screen flickered, and a new alarm blared through the station. "What's happening?" Ilara shouted. Lex's face went pale. "They've triggered a virus in the system. It's trying to rewrite the data instead of purging it." Soren's hands moved faster, his voice tight with urgency. "I can stop it, but I need more time." Ilara's heart sank. Time was the one thing they didn't have. The Varnok were pressing harder, their soldiers pushing forward with renewed aggression. One of them launched a grenade, and the blast sent Ilara sprawling across the floor, her ears ringing. She scrambled to her feet, blood trickling down her forehead, and fired at the advancing enemy. But her squad was being pushed back. Nolan took a hit to the shoulder, gritting his teeth as he pressed on, and even Alina's enhanced arms struggled to keep the Varnok at bay. "We need to fall back," Nolan yelled. Ilara shook her head. "Not yet. We can't let them get to the lab." But even as she said it, she knew they couldn't hold the line forever. The Varnok were too many, and their defenses were crumbling. Just as hope seemed to be slipping away, Lex shouted from the terminal, "I've got it. The purge is complete." Soren slammed a final key on the terminal. "It's done. The formula is gone." Relief flooded through Ilara, but it was short-lived. The station shook violently again, and the ceiling above them groaned under the stress of the bombardment. The Varnok were determined to finish this once and for all. "Time to go," Ilara shouted, pulling Lex and Soren away from the terminal. Together, they retreated through the corridor, fighting off the remaining Varnok as the station began to collapse around them. They had destroyed the formula, but now they had to survive the aftermath. As they ran, Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. Soren's words echoed in her mind. Had they truly stopped the Varnok's plan, or had they only delayed the inevitable? Ilara sprinted through the crumbling corridors of Astra Prime, her heart pounding in her chest as the station groaned and trembled with each explosion. Behind her, the rest of her team followed, their breaths ragged, their faces smeared with dirt and blood. The destruction of the Supersoldier Formula had been a small victory, but the Varnok was still coming, and the station was falling apart around them. "We can't hold them off much longer," Nolan shouted, clutching his wounded shoulder as he staggered to keep pace. Ilara knew he was right. The Varnok were relentless, and with the formula destroyed, there was no chance of them retreating. If anything, they would double their efforts to wipe out every last human on the station. But even as the walls shook and debris fell from the ceiling, Ilara refused to give in to despair. "Get to the shuttle bay," she ordered, turning back to fire a few rounds at the Varnok soldiers still in pursuit. "We're not done yet." Alina Graves, her mechanical arms sparking from the strain, took up position beside Ilara. If we can make it to the shuttle, we might have a shot at getting off this rock, but we're going to need a miracle to hold them back long enough. Ilara's jaw tightened. We make our own miracles. As they pressed forward, the sounds of the Varnock closing in grew louder. Ilara could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. Every step they took seemed like a race against death. Yet, amidst the chaos, she noticed something odd. The Varnock were no longer shooting to kill. They were trying to capture them. "They want us alive," Ilara muttered, her brow furrowing. "Why?" Lex, panting as he ran alongside her, glanced at the crumbling walls. "They need us. The formula's been destroyed, but if they capture us, they can still extract it from our DNA." Alina cursed under her breath. "So we're walking genetic time bombs." Ilara nodded grimly. "Then we can't let them take us." The team reached the shuttle bay, the last functional area of the station. Ilara quickly scanned the room, her heart sinking as she saw only one shuttle still intact. It was small, too small to hold all of them comfortably, and its engine was already powering up, its lights blinking in the dim, smoke-filled space. "We're cutting it close," Nolan grunted as he stumbled toward the shuttle. "How long to get this thing ready?" Lex rushed to the shuttle's control panel, his fingers flying over the interface. "It's going to take a few minutes to launch. The system's damaged." "We don't have a few minutes," Ilara growled, hearing the footsteps of the Varnock soldiers closing in behind them. The doors to the shuttle bay suddenly burst open, and a wave of Varnock commandos flooded the room, their energy weapons glowing with deadly intent. Ilara raised her rifle and fired, her squad following suit. The sounds of gunfire and energy blasts filled the air as the two forces clashed in a desperate final stand. But even with the enhanced abilities from the formula, Ilara and her team were growing weary. The effects of the enhancement were taking a toll. Every movement felt heavier, every breath more labored. The Varnock pressed forward, their soldiers more disciplined, more focused. They were determined to capture the humans, no matter the cost. "Hold them off," Ilara shouted as she ducked behind a fallen piece of metal debris, firing round after round at the advancing Varnock. "Lex, get that shuttle ready now." Lex worked furiously at the shuttle's control panel, his face drenched in sweat. "I'm trying. It's almost there." As the battle raged, Soren Carvos, who had remained mostly silent since the formula's destruction, suddenly stood up, his expression resolute. Ilara watched him closely, her rifle still firing at the enemy. "I'll buy you time," Soren said quietly, his voice barely audible over the chaos. Ilara blinked, surprised. "What are you talking about?" Soren met her eyes, his face a mix of regret and determination. "This is my fault. I've been working in the shadows, thinking I could outmaneuver both the Varnock and humanity, but I was wrong. I've done too much damage. I need to fix it." Before Ilara could protest, Soren grabbed a nearby energy grenade from one of the fallen Varnock soldiers. "You need to get out of here, Captain. You still have a chance to save humanity." "But I need to end this." "Soren, no," Ilara shouted, reaching for him, but it was too late. With a determined look, Soren charged toward the advancing Varnock soldiers. They didn't expect it. He moved too quickly, his enhanced body fueled by the last dregs of the Supersoldier Formula. He detonated the grenade in the heart of the Varnock force, unleashing a devastating explosion that shook the entire bay. The blast sent debris flying in all directions, knocking Ilara and her squad off their feet. When the dust settled, Ilara blinked through the haze, her ears ringing from the explosion. She pulled herself up, coughing as smoke filled the air. Soren was gone, along with half the Varnock force. "Ilara," Lex called from the shuttle. "It's ready. We need to go now." Ilara stumbled to her feet, her body aching from the battle, and ran toward the shuttle. Nolan and Alina followed, barely able to stay upright as they made their way inside. The doors of the shuttle sealed shut behind them as Lex initiated the launch sequence. The shuttle's engines roared to life, and with a sudden lurch, they were airborne, leaving the crumbling station behind. Through the viewport, Ilara watched as Astra Prime collapsed in on itself, the Varnok forces consumed by the wreckage. The silence in the shuttle was deafening as they hurtled through space, the adrenaline of the battle slowly ebbing away. Ilara slumped into a seat, her body heavy with exhaustion. Soren's sacrifice had bought them time, but it had come at a great cost. He didn't have to do that, Nolan muttered, his voice thick with emotion. Ilara stared out the viewport at the stars beyond, her mind racing with everything that had happened. Soren had made his choice, and while it didn't erase his betrayal, it had given them a fighting chance. "We need to focus on the future now," Ilara said quietly, her eyes never leaving the stars. "The formula is gone, but the Varnok will come again. And next time, we'll be ready." The shuttle moved silently through the black void of space, leaving the wreckage of Astra Prime behind. Inside, the tension was palpable. Ilara sat in the co-pilot's seat, staring out at the endless stars, her mind swirling with the weight of what had just happened. The battle, the destruction of the Supersoldier Formula, Soren's sacrifice, it all felt surreal. Nolan, seated across from her, winced as he adjusted the makeshift bandage on his wounded shoulder. "So, what now, Captain?" His voice was wary but steady. Ilara took a deep breath, trying to center herself. "We regroup. We return to human space, warn High Command, and prepare for what's coming next." Alina, who had been silent since they boarded the shuttle, leaned forward, her mechanical arm clinking softly as she adjusted the gears. "Do you really think the Varnok are going to give up after this? They know the formula is gone, but they still want something from us. What if it's not about the formula anymore?" Ilara's gaze shifted to the stars, the weight of the question heavy on her. "I don't think it was ever just about the formula. The Varnok saw something in us, something they feared. Maybe it's our adaptability, our resilience. They've been trying to control us, but now they know they can't." Lex, seated near the shuttle's control panel, was still scanning through the remaining data from Astra Prime. His face was pale, his eyes strained. "I've been going through the terminal logs. The formula might be destroyed, but the Varnok had already accessed parts of it. There are fragments of the data still out there, hidden in the system." Ilara's stomach sank. "Are you saying the Varnok could still use it?" Lex hesitated. "It's unlikely. Without the full sequence, they can't recreate the formula. But they have enough to try, and if they succeed in weaponizing what they've learned, it won't just be humanity at risk. They could turn their own kind into something even more dangerous." Nolan let out a bitter laugh. "Great, so we've only delayed the inevitable." Ilara shook her head. "We've bought ourselves time. That's more than we had before." The shuttle's warning lights blinked, and Lex quickly checked the controls. "We're approaching the edge of the asteroid belt. After that, we should be able to make a jump back to human space." Ilara nodded, standing up and moving to the viewport. The vast expanse of space stretched out before her, both beautiful and terrifying in its emptiness. She had led her team through countless battles, survived the impossible, but now, standing on the precipice of the unknown, the uncertainty gnawed at her. She turned to face her crew, her family in this fight. "Whatever happens next, we have to be ready. The Varnok know what we're capable of now. We're not just fighting for survival anymore, we're fighting for our future." Nolan leaned back in his seat, his expression thoughtful. "What about the formula? Even though it's gone, do you think there's still a part of us that's been changed?" Ilara glanced at Lex, who had been studying the aftereffects of the formula on their bodies. "We were enhanced for a time," Lex said carefully, "but the formula's effects will wear off. Physically, we'll return to normal. But mentally, spiritually, I don't think we'll ever be the same." Ilara nodded, understanding the deeper meaning of his words. They had tasted what it was like to be more than human, to push beyond their limits, but the price had been high. Could they go back to who they were before? As the shuttle neared the asteroid belt's edge, an alert sounded on the control panel. Lex frowned, leaning closer to the screen. "Captain, we've got company." Ilara's heart skipped a beat as she moved to his side. On the radar, 3 ships appeared, their sleek, angular shapes unmistakable. "Varnock warships," Lex muttered. "They must have tracked us." Nolan groaned. "This just keeps getting better and better." Ilara clenched her fists. They had come too far to be captured now. "Can we make the jump to human space before they catch up?" Lex worked quickly, his fingers flying over the controls. "I'm trying. Give me a few minutes." The shuttle rattled as the Varnock ships closed in, their weapons charging. Ilara watched the distance between them shrink on the radar. They were out of time. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," she ordered, strapping herself into the seat. Nolan and Alina followed suit, their faces set in grim determination. The shuttle's engines roared as Lex initiated the jump sequence, but before they could make the leap, the first Varnock ship fired, sending a blast of energy toward them. The shuttle veered sharply, the blast narrowly missing its hull. "We won't survive another hit like that," Alina shouted, gripping the armrest tightly. Ilara's mind raced. They couldn't fight the Varnock ships in this small shuttle, and they didn't have time for a prolonged escape. There had to be another way. "Lex," she said, her voice calm despite the chaos. "Is there any way we can use what's left of the formula data against them?" Lex blinked, surprised. "What do you mean?" Ilara's eyes narrowed as a plan began to form. "The Varnock fear what the formula can do to us. What if we made them think we still have it? That we've already used it, and that we're ready to fight back with something even more dangerous than before?" Lex hesitated, then his eyes lit up with understanding. "A bluff." Nolan frowned. "You think they'll fall for that?" Ilara gave a grim smile. "They've been afraid of us since the beginning. It's why they wanted to control us in the first place. If they believe we're a bigger threat than they realized, they might back off." Lex nodded, quickly pulling up the fragmented data from the terminal. "I can send out a fake transmission, make it look like we've perfected the formula and are about to deploy it. It's risky, but it might buy us time to escape." "Do it," Ilara ordered, her heart pounding as the Varnock ships loomed closer. Lex worked furiously, his hands trembling as he uploaded the false transmission. "Done. It's broadcasting now." The shuttle shuddered as the Varnock ships approached firing range again. Ilara held her breath, waiting to see if their plan would work. For a tense moment, nothing happened. The Varnock ships continued their pursuit, and Ilara feared the bluff had failed. Then suddenly, the lead ship hesitated. Its engines slowed, and the other 2 ships followed suit. The Varnock, it seemed, were reconsidering. "They're pulling back," Lex whispered, disbelief in his voice. Ilara exhaled in relief. The bluff had worked. For now, at least, the Varnock believed humanity still held the upper hand. "Get us out of here," Ilara said quietly, her body sagging with exhaustion. Lex initiated the jump, and within seconds, the shuttle blinked into the safety of hyperspace, leaving the Varnock ships behind. As they sped toward human space, Ilara leaned back in her seat, her mind racing with everything that had happened. The Supersoldier Formula was gone, but the threat of the Varnock remained. This was only the beginning of a much larger war. But for now, they had survived, and they would fight again. Ilara closed her eyes, her resolve hardening. Humanity would not fall. Not today, not ever.